in 2001, was having a severe drug problem in their country, decided to decriminalize all drugs. All of them. And what happened was craziness. Crime went down, overdoses went down, the spread of HIV went down because they decriminalized everything. So here's an article that was in Truthdig back in 2015. Portugal's approach is saving lives. Why aren't we copying it? Because there's a new statement that came out from the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations saying that maybe we should implement this. Because a former government official from Portugal is now involved with the UN. So here's from the Washington Post back then, how they responded to the evidence of Portugal having decriminalized drugs for so many years, what the Washington Post had to say. Portugal decided to treat possession and use of small quantities of these drugs as a public health issue, not a criminal one. Something we've talked about on this show. We talked about it during Super Chat Sunday several times. When you lock people up, the human body gets physically addicted to drugs, right? And then if they're illegal, people will commit crimes to do them. Now, obviously, drug addiction and everything associated with is a very, very complex issue. There's been studies, it's something around 65-70% of addicts were abused as kids, and then they self-medicated. There's also people who suffer from forms of mental illness who self-medicate, but a lot of people that were physically or sexually abused, a lot of addicts, they found, were a high rate of addicts or physically or sexually abused, because the pain from that and dealing with that and feeling like you're no good because you're told you're no good when you're getting abused as a kid like that you then do self-destructive behavior. It's why they talk about, survivors of childhood sexual abuse. They're called survivors because many don't make it because they end up on drugs and alcohol, they OD, there's high rates of suicide. So, of course, that's more issues we don't want to deal with in America. No. We don't want to deal with the Catholic Church or Penn State University or any of that, the way our children are treated in our society. And 1 in 4 women are sexually abused, 1 in 6 men are sexually abused. We don't want to deal with that. And if you've gone through some serious trauma and you don't know what to do and don't know how to get help and you turn to drugs just to feel better, well, then we should fucking lock you up. Because that's the heartless, cruel war culture of America. I'll go back to the Washington Post article. Treated as a public health issue, not a criminal one. The drugs were still illegal, of course, but now getting caught with them meant a small fine and maybe a referral to a treatment program, not jail time and a criminal record. So, and people say that the argument is always, well, if we make drugs illegal, everyone's going to run around and just going to be people doing heroin in the streets and it's going to be madness and mayhem. And here's a country that did it, and that didn't happen. I'll go back to the article. Whenever we debate similar measures in the U.S., marijuana decriminalization, for instance, many drug policymakers predict dire consequences. If you make any attractive commodity available at lower cost, you will have more users, former Office of National Drug Control Policy Deputy Director Thomas McLean once said of Portugal's policies. Oh, great, another American that's never been anywhere and that's how we deal with everything. And then my other question, is it working? This war on drugs has been going on since the 20s. It's not working. We're not addressing the problem. In typical American fashion, we're not addressing the problem. It's like dealing with the obesity problem and just locking up overweight people or just getting them all bigger pants. It's like we're not dealing with it. We're not dealing with it. Joseph Califano, founder of the Center for Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, once warned that decriminalization would increase illegal drug availability and use among our children. How would it, if we decriminalize it, how would it increase illegal drug use? Alcohol is legal, prescription drugs, and prescription drug, addiction is brutal. But the pharmaceutical companies spend a lot of money to make sure everybody's all hopped up on their product. Drug use and drug deaths are complicated phenomena. They have many underlying causes. Portugal's low death rate can't be attributed solely to decriminalization. As Dr. João Galão said, the architect of the country's decriminalization policy, has said, it's very difficult to identify a causal link between decriminalization by itself and the positive tendencies we have seen. All right, that's fair. Still, it's very clear that decriminalization hasn't had severe consequences that the opponents predicted. It's all this old Puritan nonsense, this country. As the Transformed Drug Policy Institute says in its analysis of Portugal's drug laws, the reality is that Portugal's drug situation has improved significantly in several key areas. Most notably, HIV infections and drug-related deaths have decreased, while the dramatic rise in use feared by some has failed to materialize. And now, the United Nations and the World Health Organization is suggesting the same thing. Look at the gangster era in America when alcohol was illegal. Look what happened. You decriminalize it, you tax it, you also give better education. If we had an education system that actually taught health and drug, it really taught it and addressed people's problems, then we wouldn't have all of this. Let's start with decriminalizing marijuana on a federal level. Let's start there. Tulsi Gabbard suggested it. Let's start there. Another reason to back progressives. Thanks for supporting independent media.